Welcome to the Mothers Leading the Way video series. Join us as we explore practical tips and tricks based on research to manage the many roles that working mothers play. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Mothers Leading the Way podcast. And I am just so excited to have Penny Zenker, the Focusologist, join us today and talk about how, as working moms, we can manage to maintain our focus when so many things pull us in so many different directions. And so, Penny, if you don't mind, can you please just tell us a little bit more about yourself and what your professional life is centered around?
Sure. I think all of us have had quite an interesting path. So I started out actually in accounting and finance, and I'm not sure how then I got to technology. And I started my own technology business and built it up from just me to a multi-million dollar business and sold it to a public company, and then ended up in public speaking. So, and lots of different steps along the way. So I think we, have interesting ways that we get to unravel how we find our true purpose or calling, or if we're lucky enough to find it.
Yes.
And for me, the common theme throughout the whole thing that I later was able to say this is how these puzzle pieces fit together was really around focus. And at first I thought it was technology and that I just loved to work with technology, but it was what I loved technology could do for us, which was do things more efficiently and effectively, and enable us to focus on the more challenging work and let the day-to-day repeatable activities that we could automate those types of things. And so then as it went into coaching, it was how do we focus on the things in our self-development that help us be our best self, and how do we let go, which is a part of focusing as well, which hopefully we'll get to talk about. And so, yeah, I just found that common theme was about focus. And I don't just mean attention. I mean focusing on the right things and the things that lead us towards the result that we're looking for.
Very good. And I'm so excited to learn more about this. So in your experience as a coach or a motivational speaker, what are some of the common obstacles that mothers face when it comes to their focus or attention?
Yeah. As a many years I was a single mom, so I can relate to a lot of those struggles directly. And I think one of the challenges is our guilt, the feeling that we have to kind of do it all, and you know, and the struggle that we have in that is trying to be the best mom that we can be, and also be the best in whatever it is that we're doing on the work side. So I think the guilt of when we are working and we feel like we might be sacrificing some of the time with our children is something that we definitely struggle with. I think also that, as my kids got older and they had different activities, right? Then it's really the scheduling aspect of it is not just your schedule, but how do you manage all the carpools that you have to do, and, all of those things. So it's really getting organized in a way that helps you be your best in each area, and how do you focus on what matters most in each area. So I think that's a big challenge for us. And yeah, I think also is that we sometimes we have to work harder, or when we're in a male oriented society, and we feel like in order for us to compensate for the times where we might have to do something for our children, that we tend to then, I think, put more of ourselves into what we're doing. And also that means also emotionally, right? We're more emotional beings. And so that takes its toll on us as well, in terms of never making time for ourselves. So those are some of the big challenges that I see, and that leads, all of those can lead to burnout, which is why I think we see such a high level of burnout today, is mostly in women, and because of this emotional attachment that we have that we're bringing to everything that we do.
Right. And I really resonate with that scheduling piece. I
I saw
remember,
you.
yeah, absolutely, because I remember having my calendar and blocking off for at a time when I was a single mom as well. How was I going to get kids to their activities while also meeting all my work deadlines. And I love thinking about even how technology can assist in that as well, in terms of what you're able to do as you're doing these multiple tasks and playing these multiple roles.
Yeah,
So,
and also communication, right? I don't know
yes.
where what age your kids are, but as my kids got older, it's also in the communication because they wouldn't tell me until the last minute that they needed to
Yes.
be somewhere or that they had something or they needed a gift or whatever
Right.
whatever it is. So, there's the technology piece, but we sometimes minimize the communication piece that's equally as important in our ability to stay focused as well.
Right, absolutely. And I know you kind of ended on the idea of burnout, and we are seeing this pretty broadly, discussions about burnout in a much more meaningful way than I think has been done in the past. We're kind of discussing that as a society,
Mm.
and so how does burnout contribute to difficulties with concentration or focus?
Squirrel. Oh,
Yeah.
what? So I think that burnout in itself, how I mean it leaves us in a place where we are lacking our own resourcefulness, right? So I liken it also to we get to a place where let's say we have a cup of water. And so burnout's at the place where the water's not filling up anymore. So it's draining and it's not filling up anymore. So and we don't know how to get that back. We don't know what's the source that's going to help to fill that up. And but we just keep going, right? Regardless. And so until a point where our health says that we can't anymore. And it's usually like a mandatory type of thing. So it destroys our focus. But I think that it's happens way before we even get to burnout. I mean, I believe today that we live in a state of distraction and disconnection. We see Gallup, with their study over the years that have shown that we were disengaged as a population, right? More than I forget what the number was, 70% approximately are disengaged in the workplace. And that's not lessening. And it's not lessening because we have more and more distractors. And we typically think of our phone, social media, and those types of things. But there's so many other things that are also stealing our energy, or I shouldn't say stealing because we are allowing it. And that's the challenge is we've worked ourselves into a place where we exhaust ourselves trying to control the things that we can't. And then we find ourselves in a place of learned helplessness when it comes to setting boundaries and, shutting off our phones and social media or limiting the time in that. Or as we talked about, being more structured in the way that we organize our time with time blocking. So I think we've worked our way into this burnout situation. And I'm so glad that it is something that we're talking about. Because it's just gotten to a point where focus is the exception and not the rule.
Absolutely. And I think as a cognitive psychologist, what I oftentimes talk about is as we burn out, as we kind of reach mental and physical exhaustion,
Hmm.
what happens is our resources become so depleted that we're not able to engage in emotional regulation.
Yeah.
We have less ability to regulate our behaviors, and that then just contributes to more exhaustion. And so it becomes this cycle that if we're not intentional, it becomes very difficult to break. So
Absolutely.
I'm
I've
excited about kind of learning about some ways in which we can break those cycles. So, and I think with working mothers in particular, there are just so many roles and responsibilities. And you're balancing those various roles, all the responsibilities that are on your list. So what are some strategies that working moms can use to improve their focus and limit their distractions when working from home?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing you mentioned it is, in the self-regulation and is taking care of you. We constantly hear the old flight adage, take the oxygen mask and you use it first before you help others. It's important, right? So we need to have a daily practice to start the day that focuses on ourselves and focuses on building that energy. As I said, putting water back into that cup. And that can look like a lot of different things for different people. For some people, it might be reading scriptures or filling themselves up with something very, very positive and something that gives them energy and purpose and gratitude. Right? I've written in a gratitude journal for more than 15 years now, and I find that is a way for me to help to make sure that every day starts out in a positive, purposeful way, and that's important. And then I also think that we need to have some kind of movement. Our bodies were meant to move. So in that morning, sort of getting ourselves together, it's also taking a quick walk, doing some calisthenics. It doesn't have to be a lot of time, right? A little bit of stretching and yoga, but if we can parse it out and say, okay, we're going to spend 10 minutes if you don't have more, right? 10 minutes of movement, 10 minutes of mindset, right? And then 10 minutes to get yourself in line and planned for the day. That's the other thing that I think makes, once you've taken care of yourself, and the more that you do that, by the way, and what I call is, it's daily resetting. And when we do that, that builds over time and makes us more resilient over time because we have that regular practice. And then starting that day with a plan. I find that a lot of people, they start their day without a plan of what is most important for them to do. And then so quickly, the first thing that they do, what's the first thing that most people do? They grab their phone, they look at their email, right? They start to get involved in other people's urgencies. And that's all email does, is now I'm looking through and seeing who needs what from me versus me being very clear to stay away from my email unless it's me sending an email that's one of my highest purposes for the day. So I also reserve that initial time in the day to not check email until I've done those things that are most important.
It's a great idea, because I know I can get caught in that never ending cycle of email and get distracted very
Right.
quickly, and not accomplish the things that are most important to me.
Right, and that's the first reaction we allow in the day, and then it just gets worse from there, right? It's kind of like we open Pandora's box and then the distractions just keep coming. So, and you mentioned, how do we block those distractions? We know what to do most of the time. We just don't do it. We have to turn off those notifications on everything, make it more of a pull system. I'll go and pull it when I need it versus everything being pushed to us, right? Because then that creates overwhelm or just, oh, I wonder what that was, or it it distracts us and creates sort of this switching, right? The task switching that is a huge problem and a huge distraction. And often it's not a distraction that people think about. They think about the phone, they think about their kids walking in, and all of those things can also be planned, you know, especially with quality time with young kids. Spend some quality time with them and then let them know, okay, now mommy needs an hour, and here when the clock gets to this, if they're young, right? And that tended to work for me as long as I gave that quality time first. But that task switching, that's a really big one that we have to really stop trying to multitask and think that we can do all these things at the same time. and there's some great tests out there that that help us to see that it's really not effective unless you're folding laundry and listening to a podcast. You could do that at the same time, but the work that we do day in and day out needs our attention. Do one thing and then go to the next thing.
And realize that when we task switch, even if it's just, okay, I'm going to answer that question and then I'll come right back. Every time you shift your attention, there is time that it takes for your brain to disengage, to re-engage, to
Mhm.
then disengage and re-engage. And so that one
Huge
task,
tax.
yes, it is. It's taxed. And so definitely something that I think in the past we were really encouraged to do. But now we're really understanding the true cognitive cost of that. So
Absolutely. I mean, the science is irrefutable,
yes,
is that we make twice as many errors and it takes twice as long to do those tasks. And if it just, why would we want to, redo something that we just did? Would we choose to do that? No way, right? No way. So if we keep that in the forefront of our mind, that when we try to multitask like that, then we're almost asking for it. We're almost asking for those errors. And and that has a reputation effect too, right? We want to keep our jobs. We want to, if you're an entrepreneur, you want to make sure you're being seen as the best in your field, or highly credible. And when you write an email and it's got spelling errors, and I know I'm guilty of some of this too, right? But we have to be more focused on the quality of the work that we do and not just the quantity of the work that we do.
absolutely. I think this is also a great opportunity for everybody to role model for their children, because our children are being kind of faced with this constant distraction. And so when they're able to see you maintain your focus, you're also role modeling that for them. I remember my daughter when she was 16, was trying to do her schoolwork, and she had her cell phone, and she was like, oh, she'd stop and look at a text that came in, and I said, okay, hold on, let's have a conversation with it about this. And of course, if you have teenage children, it doesn't even matter if you have a degree in cognitive psychology. You don't understand.
Right.
That's what I was told, is you don't understand. I'm just
Right.
quickly looking at this. It's not a big deal. And so I actually timed her. And I sat there and I did a little stopwatch. I said, okay, in this 30 minutes of studying, your eyes were off this long, and if we think about what's happening, just with your eye contact alone, you've lost this many minutes,
Mhm.
and we know that your brain follows. So, so now let's double that, and
Right.
this is actually how much time you study. And yet she felt she had studied for the full 30 minutes.
Sure.
So I think sometimes we can role model it, sometimes we can point it out, and hopefully through those different mechanisms, we start to see our children be able to stay on task and focused.
Yeah, it is important that we set the example, like you said. I see that in a lot. When I talked about quality time, for instance, um, I definitely see my children looking to do that as well, because when they were young, especially when they were young, as I said, we would spend that quality time, and then they would have time to work on their projects while mommy worked on her projects. And so that was also, like you said, a modeling that, so as they got older, right, they were more dedicated to their projects and even with their friends, then they'd have their quality time with their friends, and
Right.
be able to separate that. But I love what you said also, is about, it's about experimentation, right? For us as well, is that sometimes we don't get it in one way. So we have to put ourselves into certain experiments to say, well, let's just see. So what if we didn't sleep with the phone by our bed, and didn't actually touch the phone until, let's say, 9:30 in the morning? And we had that first hour. If you start work at 8:30, that first hour without the phone, without any email, do a test and see how much different it feels and what you accomplish. I do that with a number of my clients all the time. As I said, let's just take a test for this week or 2 weeks. Let's do a time audit, for instance. That's a really good way for people to get clear on where are they spending their time, and where do they need to be spending their time. So sometimes we don't really have a good feel for it. Like your daughter, like, okay, I
Yes.
think I'm really using that time. But it's like a food journal as well, right? Is doing those types of things and having people journal what they're eating or what they're doing or how much water they're drinking or how many steps you're taking. All of those things get us hyper focused to see, well, how effective are we? And often there's the ahas. I've had many people after doing a time audit, like, wow, I didn't realize how much time I spend in my email, or I didn't realize, how little time I spend on sales, for instance. And that's one of the most important areas of my business. Or, people just getting that awareness so they can make better choices is absolutely key in focusing on the right things.
Absolutely. And I think you actually said that perfectly. It's like we're so distracted that we can't even focus on our distraction. That, that we don't even have an awareness of it because
Right.
we're not ever taking the time to reflect upon it. And so genuinely, people don't know oftentimes until they take that time to audit. So
Yeah,
great,
I'd love
great
to share a
thought.
new concept that I'm working on. I'm writing a
Absolutely.
book around what I call reset moments. And it's exactly this point, is to build in and recognize more reset moments, more moments where we engage in what I call a reset practice, which is to step back, to get perspective, and to realign. And it's by doing that, right? Stepping back means that we're getting that awareness of what's working, what's not working. What is it that we're really looking to achieve? Sometimes we get so caught up in the task that we lose sight of the big picture and what it is we're really working towards, or we've defined the problem maybe in the wrong way, or we're not adapting to how the problem has changed. So stepping back gets us out of that emotional state, little detached, to be able to see things for what they are. And then getting perspective about being able to, maybe it is try different ways of doing it and see which way works better, or be open to outside voices and just not getting caught up in the same way we've always done things. Because I've always found that things, they work and you're cruising along really well, but then you hit a plateau. Like, I had so many great strategies that worked for me until the pandemic, and then they stopped working.
Yes.
Well, my circumstances changed, my expectations changed, or didn't change sometimes, right?
Yes.
So, so those reset moments to help us to step back, get perspective, and then realign with the best next step that's in line with our values, what's in line with our intentions and our goals is so important. So if we can just build in more of those and recognize more of those, then we are going to be able to be more focused, more intentional, and also, I believe, more resilient, because the the reset practice, in my opinion, is it's like a superpower. And we all have the access to it. We just need to remember to do it and build it in as a practice, because it's a time management tool that helps us stay focused and set priorities. It's a an innovation tool, opening us up to new ideas and new ways of looking at things. It's a leadership tool to help us to share with others, whether it's our children, right, or the people that we work with, to share with them on how they can better set their priorities, or the last point is to self-regulate. It's a resilience tool that helps us to self-regulate and helps us also, as I mentioned kind of in the beginning, to let go of things that we can't control and that are of lesser importance, so that we can focus on the objective. So if we just built that into our daily practice as a reset practice, and these reset moments, and recognizing them, we're going to see a huge shift in our ability to stay focused.
And I think what's exciting about that is it is something that can be done again and again. so that you don't become stagnant. And because the world is ever changing, and we as individuals are ever changing. And so
Absolutely.
it really does allow us to kind of um, go back to what's most important to us, our values, to go back to our strengths, to go back to the things that mean the most to us. So I love that
Absolutely.
idea.
And
Look
so
forward to.
easily we delete them, right? We get
Yeah,
so caught up in the emotion of something, or our ego maybe takes us down a certain path. And like you said, we might delete some of the strengths that we have that we can access, but in the moment we're not utilizing them, right? Or some of those other things that you said as well, is to recognize where we're going astray from some of our values and coming back in line with what is most important, and setting boundaries so that we're true to that. And we just need to slow down so that we can be more efficient and effective in the way that we think, right? I believe it's about thinking smarter so that we can work smarter, right? If we're not thinking smarter, we're not going to work smarter.
right. And working smarter, not just in our work life, but even in our home life. That's still
Absolutely.
working, and so in both situations, it allows us to kind of reset, refocus, and realign.
Yeah.
I really look forward to seeing that book. So, um, I think when I think about working mothers, probably I've done this actually with a class before, where I would put different roles or respond, different types of individuals up on the board, and ask, what are the words that come to mind. And when I say, working mother, one of the statements that always comes up is stressed.
Mm.
And so even, individuals who may not be mothers themselves seem to recognize the stressfulness of being a working mom. And so how can working mothers address their stress or reduce their burnout?
Well, so, back to where we said what were the biggest challenges,
Right.
right? So one of the things is expecting that they need to do it all. So they can address it by changing their expectations of, they're not expected to be everywhere at once. And if they need to ask for help, and, I believe that it takes a village to raise your kids. So get into carpools so that you're not driving your kid all the time, that you're switching, and then maybe you're only driving once a week, for instance. Right. So that's part of the thinking smarter, is to step back and see, okay, how could I save myself some time and effort? Does that mean you love your kid any less, or that they're going to love you any less because you're only driving once a week? No. Could you have pre-prepared meals that are, Sundays, for instance? Just do the cooking that you need, and that'll be available for quickly pulling it out of the freezer and heating it up. Um, Give your kids chores. I mean, my kids, they did toilets. We had a little chart and they would spin, but they didn't just do like the nice things like cleaning the table. They had like serious jobs to do. Now, granted, when they were young, I probably had to go over some of the things that they did. But it's looking for ways to utilize the resources that you have, within yourself, within your community, within your friends. It's also, how do you open up and have more conversations at work about, you don't have to accept every deadline that is necessarily given to you. You can question. And I don't mean in a pushback like you're wrong, but it's okay to say, and when do you need this by? Right? If we don't ask and we make the assumption, oh, it's due tomorrow, I'm going to have to work late. When do you need this by? And then maybe split it out a little bit and say, well, I have these other priorities. Which would you rather? I'm not going to be able to accomplish all of them today. Would you rather this or this? Or could we split this up into 3 parts, which is the most important part? I could get that to you, but I would have to finish the rest tomorrow, next week, or whatever. So I think it's also engaging in more conversation, and looking for areas to reduce that stress. Another thing, and I don't know if is just to ask ourselves, have this like little set of questions that you can ask yourself. What distracts you the most? Because that can cause stress. What creates the most stress? What where might you be repetitive and that you could cut something out that isn't important? Where do you get lost in the things that aren't important? So by asking yourself a couple of those questions too, you can gain greater awareness as to where is the stress coming from.
Right. And I think, when I listen to that, the prioritization comes back, of, you know, uh, what is most important to get done, and
Right.
asking ourselves, instead of believing that we must be all things to all people at all times in every way, and really, questioning that expectation. And many times it's ourselves that have that expectation. No
Sure,
one
most of
else
the
is
time.
expecting it other than us. And so, really taking that moment to think about it, and question that, and then also question control. I know there are certain things that, somebody else in the household would happily do, but they would not do it the way that I want it done. And so then I need to ask myself, is this stress
Right.
worth me having that control? And I think when you really kind of balance that out, it oftentimes isn't. For me, at
Absolutely.
least, it isn't. And so that's the moment where I have to go, okay, I need to let go of the control.
Yeah, absolutely. Control it's like a cycle, right? Because when we feel out of control, like at work, then we might try to control at home.
Yes.
And, because we and it's unconscious. We don't mean to, but it's this desire, this need to get back into control, to feel grounded and to have some certainty. And what we don't realize is when we're controlling, we're actually losing even more control, right? Because we're disempowering the people in our household, right? To help us. People won't ask us for help if we're constantly controlling. So, we're kind of blocking them away and putting that up. And it just makes our life more difficult. So I 100% agree that we have the opportunity to check in and say, is this worth it? Do I really need to redo that?
Yes.
We'll just let it go and we'll see how it goes, next week. Or I know because my husband actually, he kicks me out of the kitchen because I don't know. I cook just fine,
Right.
but he likes to have control of the kitchen, and so that's fine for me, right?
Yes. Right.
But if it's causing stress, I do see sometimes where it causes him stress. And so that is something for me. What's interesting is whenever we feel stressed, we feel frustrated, we feel highly emotional in any direction, right? That's a signal for a reset moment to me. When you feel that come up, you feel frustrated, you feel distracted, recognize those feelings, name them, and then take a reset moment and see where this is coming from. Because that's the signal that something needs to shift. Maybe it's your expectation that I don't need to do all of this, or maybe it's that idea of trying to control things that you can't. That's another thing, is that maybe you are given a deadline at work and you can't control it, and you do have to work through dinner one night or something like that, and it's not in line with your values, but it's not a regular thing. So we can get ourselves all worked up about it and get stressed, or we can just let that go and say it's out of our control, and we'll do the best that we can with the circumstances that we have, and we'll show up better. We'll perform better when we let go of the things that we can't control.
Absolutely. That's a great advice. How can working mothers advocate for themselves? Because obviously all these things are going on, and with kind of the expectations of what it means to be a woman in the workplace, what might be some effective tips for them as they communicate their needs to their employers?
Great. I think it's what's important is to stand in your confidence first, because if you're not confident, when you go in to have a discussion, then that's going to impact the discussion, right? Energy is everything. So if you're feeling like, oh, I shouldn't be asking for this, or I don't deserve this, or they're not going to meet my expectations, or any of those types of things, that's something you're going to need to deal with first. You are a working mother. That's great. Other people have their circumstances, maybe their special needs, and they have special needs and concerns and adaptations, and even you know men that are working under circumstances. It might be they have a long commute, or right, maybe today it's not the commute, but it's something else. We all have our needs, and we're all entitled to ask and to have a discussion around our needs. And I think that the awareness today more than ever about being flexible in the workplace for different people's circumstances. Some people take classes at night, right? So go in with confidence, and but have prepared for it and know what it is that you're asking for and what you need. One of the challenges I think that happens is that people might go into a conversation like this and they're not advocating for themselves because they don't have clarity as to what they're asking for. So if they're asking for a certain amount of time off, or if you need to end your work days at 4 o'clock, and then how do you want to approach that? Do you want to compensate that by working through lunch? Like, I'm happy to, but that's a sacrifice for yourself. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's why we need to think through our answers as well. Is maybe it's, well, there's certain types of work that I don't need to be online when everybody's online. So I could do that earlier in the morning, or I could do that later at night. Finding out, just having a conversation about what kind of flexibility do I have with, let's say, the current responsibilities that I have, that type of thing. So I think it's really having that clarity when you go into the conversation as to what it is you're asking for and you're advocating for.
And what's interesting, I've had people come in and they're like, "Well, I'm just overwhelmed," and it's like, okay, so what can we do? What will help with this? And if you've already thought of your answers, then it's less about you being overwhelmed and more about how can we make the work better.
Definitely. And it's if you are feeling overwhelmed, again, that's a point to say, okay, this is a reset moment, but understand as you said, you go in and you say, well, what's overwhelming me? Is it the workload? Okay, well, let's break down the workload and ask maybe if certain tasks could be taken over by someone else, or if you could get an intern, or right, think about your own solutions. I think as I was previously a boss in an organization, I appreciated when people came to me with solutions.
Yes.
If they did just come and say, I'm overwhelmed, okay, I have a responsibility there to then ask some quality questions. But not every boss asks, or manager or leader has the knowledge of your situation, and may not ask the type of questions that are going to best support you. So it is better that you've thought that through yourself.
And where possible, have multiple options. So that if
Absolutely.
one option is not acceptable, there are some other options that can be explored, to have a more robust discussion, I think is helpful.
For sure. I think that if we're expecting flexibility, then we should also bring flexibility.
Absolutely.
I think there's plenty of situations, that are also happening today where it's like, I want you to, it should be like this. It's my way or the highway. And of course, that's not going to be received, and isn't, a great way to advocate for yourself or for others, because you're setting an example too for other working mothers, for example. And so, whatever solutions you're coming up with, that could be like a policy that gets implemented, right? Thinking about how you can support not just yourself and your situation, but others that might be in a similar situation, that you could make improvements in the organization across the board.
Absolutely. A great idea. Great idea. What strength, I mean, because we've talked a little bit about the challenges and some tips for overcoming some of the challenges, but I really do believe that there's also strength in being a working mom. And so what strengths do you think working mothers have in the area of focus?
I think I recently saw a study that if you want to get something done, you give it to a working mom, right? It's that idea if you give it to somebody who's busy and has a lot to do, that they'll get it done faster and more efficiently.
Yes.
And then that it was actually tested that it was the working moms that stood out.
Yes.
So the strength is that you are, and I'm saying you as to the person I'm speaking to, in the audience here, is you are more focused than you think. You are more organized than you think, and you have more of these skill sets than you think. And it's just it's a matter of just stepping back and reconnecting with those. As I said, we have a lot of these strengths. In the moment, we just might not be recognizing them. So I think that by looking at uh, our ability to juggle multiple things gives us an advantage because we already know how to do a lot of that. So it's like, well, how do you take some of those skills, maybe how you do it at home, and how do you apply some of that to work and some of the work things that you do? What we forget is that our strategies are cross contextual, and that
Yes.
if we have strengths in one area of our life, we can totally bring it into the other area, but we might not be accessing it. Like I had a client who was a runner, and he was, totally dedicated to his workouts and extremely uh, organized in the way that they were scheduled, because if he was doing a marathon, he had to work his way backwards and make sure that he was working into, right, so he did his whole plan. And then we were talking about his business, and I was like, where's all this amazing planning that you have? And he's like, oh, I didn't think about that, right? I don't apply that same process of thinking to this area of my business. And I said, why not? And he's like, you're right. I totally could. So everything that we do could be seen as a little project. And that might make us look at it differently. Every group of tasks could be a project. And then when we see it as a project, we can be more organized in the way that we do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that is a strength that so many working moms have. I mean, problem solving, planning, organization, creativity, all of these things are skills that we may practice within one role and not recognize that we also have the potential to bring into the workplace. So
Absolutely. I'd love to a couple of examples, right, of creativity and also focusing on what's most important and quality time. So, like, one of the things that I used to do was when I was traveling, I wanted to make sure that my kids felt loved during that time and that there was still some quality time. So even, we Zoom and things like that, but I would leave them little gifts around the house that were hidden with clues, and that made it more fun, right? So that brought out the creativity. And I do think that the more that I put creative things into the work at home, the more I see that spill over to think about, well, how else could I look at this and how else could I do this? So I do think all of those amazing things that we might not realize, right? That's creative. That's being creative. Or like you said, the planning, the decision making, right? All day long decision making. How do we do that? Maybe if we just stepped back and said, well, how do we make these decisions the way that we do it? And how could we apply that into other areas of our lives? Or how do we do that in business
mhm,
and then do that at home?
right.
Right. So it might be that it has to go, in both directions.
Right, absolutely. Wonderful. So, beyond work-related tasks, how can working mothers remain present with their children when they're away? When they're away from work, but work is still kind of there. How can we kind of engage in these focus practices at home?
Yeah. Well, so one, I just told a great story, right? Which was when we are away, right? We can engage them by doing fun things and setting them up for them for them to feel special. Leave them cards under their pillows. Uh, you know, uh, I put I do that kind of stuff just to stay connected. You can also do projects together. I think it's about quality time together. So even though work is there, you want to, if you can, have a door that you can close or something that you can shut off, shut down, right? And it's in another room, so that when you're outside of that room, you're present and you're with your kids. So have a little project together. Maybe it's depending on how old they are, it might be a painting project where you're painting something together. Maybe you're learning a new skill. Maybe there's something in the yard that you're doing. So I find that those types of things help me to stay focused and connected. Maybe you're reading the same book together and then you're going to talk about it. Um, playing games and things like that. I also think one of the things that have transitions have been eroding in our lives and in our workplace. So like, we don't have that commute anymore. So we don't have that transition that helps us to really shut down and then show up differently. Yeah, I used to listen to music and that would be my, okay, I'm coming home and I've shut down, or people are on the phone the whole time and they never shut down. So one of the things that I suggest is, go take a shower. Go at the end of the workday or when you're making a transition, take a shower so that you're, as a symbol that you're washing away the day and you're going to be there for your kids, or go for a walk, go walk the dog, go for a quick walk. If you're not in an area that you can go for a quick walk, just leave the front door and then come back in. So you're being intentional about saying, okay, I am going to shift my focus right now. Maybe it's a song that you create that's an end of day song that's kind of like the Fred Flintstone Yabba Dabba Doo,
Yeah.
and beep beep. But when you listen to that song, that's your trigger that it's the end of the day. And then maybe even just one word or set an intention of how you want to show up with your family after work.
And I think this is also an opportunity to have those conversations with your employer of, okay, from this time to this time, I'm not going to be responding to email or phone calls. Maybe I will check at this time, but from this time, this is a protected time that I want to spend with my family.
Absolutely.
So I'm intentionally shutting that door, and I will not be looking at my phone. And I think having those conversations we go back to the communication, right? That's so important. And then when the rare situation occurs, then a decision can be made, but it's made in a much more thoughtful manner, and can even be in consultation with the family. Hey,
Yeah.
I've been asked to do this. What are your thoughts? Depending on their age and the, the specific situation. So,
Absolutely. And that goes for vacations and holidays, right? Is let them know that you're not available, right? I think that we need to be stronger with setting our boundaries. And so to your point is have that discussion and let it be known these are the hours that I'm not available. And I also think there's the planned conversations, but then there's the situational ones. If someone crosses a boundary and they send you a text at 6 a.m. and they expect you to respond to that text, you need to say, hey, I just want you to know I do not check texts before, and I will not respond before 8 o'clock or whatever the time is, unless it's an emergency. And then I think there's an opportunity for communication is how do we define emergencies in the organization as well as at home, right? If you're working and you don't want your kids to interrupt you, so that you're clear on how do you communicate emergencies so that if something does come up that requires your immediate attention, that you'll be there, but otherwise it's not going to distract you.
so I know you have the idea of a gatekeeper. And so can you tell us a little bit more about that and how it protects our focus?
Absolutely. So, I used to do a lot of coaching for salespeople, and one of the things that salespeople do when they're looking to get to the decision maker is they have to go through who they call the gatekeeper, right? It's like a admin assistant or somebody that holds the calendar of that decision maker. And I thought we should all have gatekeepers. Why don't we all have gatekeepers to protect our time, to direct it towards the things that are most important? So I came up with this idea, right? That there are three pillars or three types of gatekeepers that we can implement into our lives. And this is equally valuable for work or at home. And it's just the type of things that you set might be different. So the first area is rules. Is when we set rules, it actually eliminates our need to make so many decisions, right? It's kind of pre-decided how we're going to show up, right? So if, we know when we have kids that this was a lifesaver for me. So 1, 2, 3 timeout was a lifesaver. It was a rule of what happened when, you were behaving badly. But what happened before I found this rule was I would get so upset that they were misbehaving. And then when I got upset and maybe I, yelled or got emotional, and that only led to it getting out of hand and escalating. So when I found the idea of the 1, 2, 3 timeout, now I didn't get upset at all. They were communicated and they knew what the consequence would be. So it was like, okay, you're going to go into timeout 3, 1, 2, 3. And then if they made it to 3, then they went to timeout. So these rules, they can be all sorts of things for us anytime we want to pre-decide something, right? Maybe for our health, we want to set a rule where we don't eat after 7 p.m. because maybe we have a tendency to munch and that's not good for our health, right? Or we have a rule of a standard bedtime of when we want to get in bed. So maybe instead of, I might be tempted to binge watch something, at night, maybe I would say, nope, my alarm went off. It's time for bed. I'm not going to watch that second episode. So these rules, they can benefit us. And in companies, they have standards, right? They have values that have behaviors of how they want people to show up. So these rules can really be helpful in reducing the stress and also protecting our focus. The second thing would be filters. Filters would be things like our calendar, right? We're going to do things that are on our calendar. So when we want to schedule something, then we block it out in our calendar. So if it's important, it's got to be scheduled. That's a type of filter, and there's lots of other types of filters as well. So we think about email. Email has filters. You can take everything that is a newsletter and put it into a newsletter folder, and you can set up a filter for that that will then put it automatically in there, so you don't have it in your inbox. So there's lots of different things that we can do to set filters so that we keep out the distractors and we keep in the things, and stay directed on the things that are most important. And then lastly is, what do we do in our environment to support us? So either if our phone is on the table and it's in front of us and it's faced up, that's going to negatively impact us because we're going to constantly be looking at it and wondering, who is it? What is it? But if we put it away, it's not in our immediate environment, and we put it in a drawer, we put it in the other room. Some people have a basket where phones get put instead of coming to the dinner table. Things like that is how you set up your environment can help you to be more successful. If I have water on my table, I'm more likely to drink that water, right? So looking and being more intentional about how our environment supports us for play, for our family, for our work can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. I think we all need gatekeepers. And we all deserve gatekeepers.
We do.
So I was at a conference, and the majority of the individuals were male professors. And it was a panel discussion, and there was some conversation about how do they set boundaries or limits with the many calls for their attention. And they talked about how their wives would set their calendars, and their wives would make their dinner party arrangements, and their wives would do this. And it was just me and one other female in the whole group. And I looked over to the other person, and at the same time, we both said, we need a wife. Because that, it was this gatekeeper. Right. Yet instead of it being somebody within the workplace, it was somebody in their family life that was able to maintain those boundaries and such. So that will always stay with me, just because of how much at that moment I realized some of the differences between me as a female faculty versus this larger group of male faculty.
Absolutely. And that's why the beauty of these gatekeepers is you don't need, it's not a person,
Right.
right? They're things that you can set up.
For
You know,
yourself.
it's how do you pre-plan for it? And then that way you are your own gatekeeper by
Yes.
setting them up ahead of time, right? Setting up if scenarios. If this happens, then I'm going to respond in this way. And then you have yourself as your gatekeeper.
Absolutely. And even at our work, we have a process diagram where if it's this, then it comes to me. But if it's this, or this, send straight back to the policies that are there. It's
Yeah.
only when this happens that I have to get engaged and
Yeah.
involved. And so that really helps narrow how much time I have to spend on that particular type of decision.
Right. It's so freeing, right? For that to be
Yes,
clear so that you can, you can let go of the other aspects of it and let other people take care of the roles that they're responsible for.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think sometimes we're really tempted to get involved in very low stakes
Mm,
situations that can take up a lot of our time and energy and focus when we really need to be kind of staying with the more critical decisions as leaders. So,
absolutely. Maybe I'll just quickly add a quick story
uh-huh. Yes.
to that. When you say focus on the critical decision. So I was in a place in my career back in 2001 where you mentioned control earlier, that I was so in need of control as a manager. Things were out of control in my business as it was growing. And I remember, if I were to delegate something, then I would be in somebody's face, did you do it? And then I'd hover and tell them how they should do it. And then lastly, if they didn't get it done quickly or the way that I wanted, I would just take it back and do it myself. Right. So creating my own problems. And I remember I got to a place where I was just completely exhausted and burnout. And, I felt like people weren't being accountable anymore, but it's only because I disempowered them. And I went into my boss's office and, I was telling him, I just couldn't handle it anymore. So I was there ready to quit. And, he listened to me carefully. And then he said, Penny, he said, I hired you to make decisions. And what you do with the rest of your time is up to you. What you do with the rest of your time is up to you. What? I thought that was ridiculous. But it comes back to the point that you're making, is he was simply aligning me with my role to focus on the things that are most important and to let go of those smaller tasks that aren't my responsibility. And so if I'm going to take them on, I'm not going to be able to do the work that is intended for me. And at the end, I'm only creating that burnout situation for myself. So absolutely is we need to realign and put these gatekeepers into place so that we
Absolutely.
can protect our focus.
Very good. So you've had a lot of great advice throughout this time, but just as a wrap up, what would you say is your best advice for working mothers?
My best advice for working mothers is to give yourself a break. um, Lower the expectations. We talked about it a little bit, but lower the expectations. Make sure you take time for yourself. There's an expression: if mommy's not happy, nobody's happy. So true. So really take care of yourself first. Make sure you're doing what you need to self-regulate and to be able to show up at your best. Make sure that you're not skipping your workouts or skipping your lunch hour or dedicating all of your extra time to everyone else. Make sure that you set those boundaries for yourself, and just take more reset moments. Give yourself that permission to take those reset moments in whatever shape or form that they look like. uh, I say kind of give yourself the 5-minute rule, which is to give yourself 5 minutes to reset when you need it, regardless of what's happening. You know, you can take a small amount of time. Maybe it's not even 5 minutes. A reset can also happen in 1 minute. But take a reset moment when you need it, and don't wait, because it can become too late And then that leads to, without these reset moments, that leads to burnout and breakdown.
And I think we have a choice of taking that 1 minute to reset, or in that 1 minute, because we haven't reset, we can actually do harm. And so instead, when you look at it as kind of that type of decision, why wouldn't we take the 1 minute? And I think it's another great example to role model that right now, I am not where I can have this conversation. I am not where I can make this decision, but give me a minute and let
Yeah,
me reset. And that way I can come back and give you kind of my best self. So,
absolutely. Right. And if it's an understanding that you have within your family, and even bring it into the language of your organization, is okay, we need a reset moment, or I need a timeout, so that I can pull my thoughts together, so that I don't, for yourself, so you don't say something that is going to cause more harm than good, so that you don't make a mistake in a critical situation, like you said, or uh, take a first solution without really considering that there could be other options that would be better options.
absolutely. And I think there's ways that we can frame that, depending on the context. I think sometimes, particularly within a family setting, saying that, right now, my emotions, depending on the age of the child, my emotions are big. And so I need to take a minute to stop and pause. And then then I'll be able to give you an answer. I probably would not take the same approach at work, maybe with a few coworkers, but not in general. Instead, it would be, I need to look into a few issues and possibly policy related things that I need to do some research on, and I'll get back to you. Just give me a few minutes. So there's ways to do it if you're in the workplace where you
Sure.
don't necessarily share the emotions, if that's not a culture that welcomes that.
Sure, and I think that we can get around that just by having. I'm really encouraging people to create a common language around these resets. Is, I need to take a reset moment, and that they know that that could be emotional. It could be thinking that it's just, we need to get some perspective on this. Let's get some perspective, right? And so I think when we encourage organizations to have a common language, to give people a moment to reflect, a moment to think about what's the best next step, or or just to self-regulate, uh, you know, that is something we can and should build into the language of an organization, so that we give people more space and grace.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's a wonderful way to end it too, to give people more space and grace, right? That's what we kind of need to do for ourselves, but as we also need to do for others that we're around. And when we do that, we create not just better workplaces, but also better family relations and better relationships in general. Well, I just cannot thank you enough for your wisdom as it comes to focus and resetting. And I know so many working mothers needed to hear this today. So thank you very much, and join us next time for our Mothers Leading the Way podcast.
The Mothers Leading the Way team is grateful for the support of the Jane Nelson Institute for Women's Leadership at Texas Women's University, as well as Positive Leadership at positiveleadership.com.